Hey guys, welcome back in for another live. If you're coming back for another live, we've done two today. Welcome in, everybody. Merry Christmas to you guys. Hopefully, you guys had a great Christmas and you guys are just settling in now for the evening. Hopefully, the fam's gone and the house is cleaned and all that stuff, because I know how stressful that could be during the holiday season, getting everything put back in its spot after the grandkids come, nieces, nephews, great nieces, nephews, all that stuff. So I know how that could be. But welcome into tonight's live. We're going to talk a little bit about Idaho 4. But before we get started, my name is Tanya, or TitaniumBuilt, if you're new to the channel. If you're not new, thanks for coming back and joining me for another live. If you don't mind just taking a second, hitting the like button. It is Christmas, And if you're not subscribed to the channel, we'd love to have you subscribe. We do talk true crime daily. So that's our thing over here. So welcome in, Ashley, Mary Beth. How was everybody's Christmas? Hey, Elser, Hummingbird, Amanda, Spoiling, yeah. Hey, Boone, Catherine. Hey, Captain. Hopefully everybody had a great day. Hey, Dawn. Hopefully I don't miss anybody. Nathaniel, Nate. Every time I see your I think it's your picture too. You remind me of a kid I went to school with, a guy I went to school with. You remind me of him. I don't know if it's the picture. I think it's the picture and the name, because that was his name, Nathaniel, but he went by Nate. But every time I read your name, I think about him. I'm like, wonder what he is doing 30 years later. It hasn't been that long. It's only been like 20. Hey, Susie. Welcome in. I'm afraid I'm going to skip somebody, but it's usually just when I'm like going by the blue, and I know I only have 2 mods, so. Hey, CJK. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Jen. You love talking Idaho 4. It's been a little while. I wish we knew all the details too. I wish we knew a little bit more than what we know. But I thought about going back to the beginning of that case and seeing if perhaps we missed something. I don't think we did, because we covered everything in deep details, but maybe, you never know. Hey, Sherry, how are you doing? I didn't know that, Boo. I didn't know that. Did I say hi to you, Mandy? I'm not sure if I did or not. But hello if I didn't. Hey, Dentney's. Hey, Pat Day. I think we're starting to get towards the bottom, maybe. So everyone's probably like, we're ready to go. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Aries. Oh, I'm sorry, Denise. Thank you, Cherie, for the $5 super sticker. That's very sweet of you. Thank you so much. That's very kind. Thank you. Okay, we're at the bottom. We made it. Hey, Jenny. Well, hopefully I got everybody. If I didn't, hi, hello, welcome in. Like I said, if you are new to the channel, I am Tanya, or TitaniumBuilt. You could call me either or. I don't prefer one over the other. If you hear some weird noises, they sound like something snoring. I have 2 dogs behind me, so one of them just made a weird sound. So if you hear snoring, that's why. Hey, Scotty, Merry Christmas to you. Hey, Naomi, welcome in again. I feel like I just saw you guys. I kind of did. We went, and before we get started, like I told you guys on the last live, we went to take pictures at that Christmas tree. As soon as we got there, it was raining. I was like, really? So we got a couple pictures. We got some that are just fine, but it was just kind of funny because that would happen. No snow, but it would be raining. And just enough rain to get you, like to get you wet, but it was fine. You think he did, Aries? Well, they're saying that they're looking at him for more stuff, so you may be correct. When I first read this, I was like, oh wow, that sounds like it could be. But the more I read and the more I thought about it, I realized Bryan wasn't in the area at the time. But it says here, Bryan Kohberger investigated for terrifying home invasion months before campus quadruple murders. And I wonder, like, if they will catch the person. Supposedly that was in these home invasions. And now this could work for the defense. Now, I don't know. Now, Ann Taylor could use this, so it could go either way. And I'll read you the article and you can let me know what you guys think about what's going on. Idaho quadruple murder suspect Bryan Kohberger was once investigated in connection to a terrifying home invasion in Pullman, Washington. It has been revealed. The shocking twist only deepens the mystery surrounding one of the most infamous murder cases in recent history. The Pullman home invasion occurred in October 2021, just 10 miles from the horrific events in Moscow, Idaho, where 4 students were savagely stabbed to death in their off-campus home in November of 2022. Officials said Kohberger had been investigated in connection to the initial incident, but never charged with a crime. Newly released body camera footage obtained by ABC News has shed light on the eerie break-in that left a young woman shaken and fearing for her life. I heard my door open and I looked over and someone was wearing a ski mask and had a knife. The woman told officers in the footage her voice was trembling with fear. I kicked the shit out of their stomach and screamed super loud. They flew back into my closet and then I ran out my door and up the stairs. I'm sorry. They flew back into the closet and then, they ran out of the door. The alleged attack occurred in the dead of the night at around 3:30 a.m. So, I mean, all of it's adding up, but it all could add up for the defense to use this as like well, you never caught this guy. And they would have had to investigated Bryan Kohberger after they arrested him for this because they wouldn't have done it beforehand because this was in 2021. I wouldn't think. But I'll show, this is like the body cam footage, but I'll show you a video that has the body camera footage on it. So the masked intruder was silent and held a knife as he entered her bedroom, the victim said. Despite her quick reaction and a roommate's immediate call to 911, responding officers found no trace of the suspect or any physical evidence. Just fast forward just over a year later to November 13th, 2022, when the sleepy college town of Moscow, Idaho was rocked by a quadruple killing. Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, both 21, alongside their roommate Xana Kernodle, 20, and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, 20, were stabbed to death in the early morning hours. Survivors in the home later recounted seeing a masked man with bushy eyebrows fleeing after overhearing cries and sounds of a violent struggle. 13 days after the killings, Kohberger was named as a person of interest in the Pullman case. There were chilling parallels between the Pullman break-in and the Moscow homicides. Okay, so I guess it was 13 days after the killing. So that, like the 20-something, they were saying that he thought that he was a person of interest in the Pullman case. There were chilling parallels between the Pullman break-in and the Moscow homicides. Now, if this is true, that's pretty big. I mean, even if he didn't do it, the fact that they were looking at him for it means they had their eye on him for some reason. You know, like, you just don't pull him out of a hat. I mean, he's not even from the area. Both incidents involved a masked intruder, a knife, and a silent predatory figure entering homes in the stillness of early morning hours. Yeah, that's pretty scary. But authorities have since clarified that Kohberger is no longer considered a person of interest in the Pullman case. He now faces, he's a criminology student. I hate reading that because it's like, we all know that. He now faces 4 first-degree murder charges and a felony burglary charge. Prosecutors allege Kohberger stalked the off-campus rental home before the attack and meticulously planned the murders. Actually, prosecutors said that he didn't stalk the house. However, Kohberger's potential connection to the Pullman break-in initially raised eyebrows. According to police reports, Kohberger was named a person of interest in the Pullman case just 13 days after the Idaho murders. So that's according to police reports. But some critical differences between the two cases ultimately ruled him out. The victim of the Pullman break-in described her attacker as being 5'3" to 5'5", while Kohberger stands as 6 feet tall. Furthermore, Kohberger was not yet enrolled at Washington State University at the time of the 2021 incident. Pullman police have since closed the case and it remains unsolved. And I also heard that, because I thought maybe he was down there maybe checking out the school or something like that, but that he wasn't in the area, I guess. Kohberger's background as a criminology student has only added to the intrigue, with many speculating whether his academic interest might have played a role in the planning and execution of his alleged crimes. Kohberger has filed multiple challenges to the search warrants executed during his arrest, claiming procedural errors and privacy violations. Prosecutors, however, remain steadfast in their case, rejecting his attempts to suppress evidence. His trial, scheduled to begin with jury selection on July 30th, 2025, is being heard in the Ada County in Boise in hopes of a more favorable jury. Prosecutors have claimed that Kohberger's DNA was found on a K-bar knife sheath found at the victim's off-campus home, though no murder weapon was ever found. And now that, like, I don't know, I was always wondering, like, why they never found the weapon. But what if he did take it with him and, like, hide it somewhere where only he would know? I mean, I could see Luigi Mangoni doing that with that ghost gun. He just maybe didn't have the opportunity to do it yet, so that he would know where it was, but nobody else, you know? Who knows, though? Let's see, where were we at? I just lost my spot. Officials have also claimed that cell phone data and surveillance put Kohberger's car at the crime scene. Kohberger was a PhD criminology student and teaching assistant in Washington State University's Pullman campus, a 15 miles drive from Moscow, Idaho. Kohberger has maintained his innocence. No, he hasn't. He hasn't said squat. So let's not say that he's maintained his innocence because, you know, but he does have a late night drives alibi because he didn't say anything. When they said, "What do you plead?" Silent. Hey, psyops. I don't know. I just think about, like, Mangoni having that ghost gun and, like, why didn't he get rid of that? Like, just disassemble that. He got rid of the book bag. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like that's going to be something. But I was yelling about the trash cans sitting out back for, like, they had those trash cans out there for like a year. And I'm like, what if he did walk out the back door? And what if he did slide the knife in one of them trash bags? Remember the trash bins, like the little ones? They were just like sitting out there. It irked me. It irked me so bad. It got to me. I'm like, somebody check the trash. Check the trash. Okay. I was watching this earlier, so I want to rewind it. Okay. So basically what they're going to talk about is just what we talked about in that article, about how Bryan was a suspect, or I guess a person of interest in that case, and how they ultimately ruled him out because he wasn't in the area. He hadn't started school there yet. I hope that they checked to make sure he was not in the area, like for sure. But I'm sure that they did their due diligence, you know, because I think that would have been about the time what he would have been maybe looking for schools. Oh, hold on. Sorry, guys. I don't know why it does that. It like cuts the sound. It makes me upset. Okay, it should work now.
A new twist in the Idaho college murders case. Officials now say the suspect, Bryan Kohberger, was investigated in connection with an earlier home invasion. Diane Macedo is here with the story. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning, Rebecca. So after he was named a suspect in those student murders, Bryan Kohberger was named a person of interest in an eerily similar home invasion. Now police say he's no longer a person of interest in that break-in, but the case could still have a big impact on his murder trial.
This morning, a new twist in the investigation of University of Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger.
Oh my God.
Body camera footage obtained by ABC News shows police responding to an alleged home invasion 1 year before the murders, less than 10 miles from the off-campus home where 4 University of Idaho students were stabbed to death. The woman tells police it was about 3:30 a.m. when a masked intruder entered her bedroom in Pullman, Washington, holding a knife.
I heard my door open and I looked over and someone was wearing a ski mask and had a knife. And so I like kicked the out of their stomach and screamed super loud, and they like flew back into my closet and then ran out my door and up the stairs.
According
pretty
to the
brave.
police report, she said the suspect was silent the whole time. And while one of her roommates quickly called police, officers found no suspect or evidence.
That's creepy that he was silent the whole time. I wonder if he even made a noise when she hit him in the stomach, kicked him in the gut. Or if he just got up and he was nonchalantly walked out the door like, okay, not messing with her.
Months later, Kohberger was arrested for the stabbing deaths of Kaylee Gonsalves, Madden Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin in Moscow, Idaho, where the killer also allegedly had a knife, wore a mask, entered the home in the early morning hours, and was silent as he left. 13 days later, Kohberger was named a person of interest in the Pullman case.
When you look at the Idaho murders, one of the things that detectives and agents did almost immediately is, are there other cases in the area that might have some similarities? For example, fingerprints, DNA, hair samples, anything that you could either biologically or genetically or fingerprint-wise link the suspect to that particular burglary.
But according to the report, the woman described the Pullman suspect as 5'3" to 5'5". Kohberger is 6 feet tall. The report also reveals Kohberger, a Pennsylvania resident, was not yet enrolled at Washington State University, nor was he visiting the campus as a prospective graduate student. Pullman police tell ABC News Kohberger is no longer a person of interest in the break-in, adding, "We have no reason or evidence to believe he was involved in this burglary at this time." The case is now closed, but remains unsolved. Now, with Kohberger's murder trial slated to start in August, questions are growing.
How can a case be closed, but it's unsolved? When it's from 2021, a home invasion. Like, I don't know. When I heard that, I was like, what?
About whether the defense will try to use that to raise doubt.
Without a doubt, Bryan Kohberger's
use
defense team is going to try to raise reasonable doubt by pointing to an alternative suspect. In using this alleged burglary, the question becomes, why would a judge admit this evidence where nothing about this case tends to prove that Bryan Kohberger was not the murderer?
And the victim in that break-in is speaking exclusively to ABC News, saying, quote, "My family and I have been frustrated that the case was not investigated more in depth or resolved." As for Kohberger's murder trial, the judge has entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. He could face the death penalty, guys, if he's convicted.
You hear the people at the end, he could face the death penalty if convicted. They're like, Like, what? If he's convicted, you feel bad for him? He unalived 4 University of Idaho students while they were sleeping. These kids were sleeping, not doing a damn thing wrong. They did everything right that night. Like, shoot, when I was their age, I was not doing the right things all the time. I'll tell you that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they were in they had the buddy system going. They weren't drinking and driving. They weren't, out of their wits. Like, it's just insanity. Yeah, the skinning of the dog. Yeah, Lynn. And I think the neighbor had to come forward. There was another neighbor that came forward. She didn't have the skin dog though, but I forget what happened with her. I think like somebody tried to come into her house too. And I don't know what it was. I forget. It was all the way in the beginning. You think the fraternity members are connected? I think that whoever did this, if it's Bryan or whoever it is, I think it was one person. You got to think about it like from just like think about it like just like this logic. Think about it like this. If you were going to commit a crime such as like unaliving 4 people, to get somebody to go along with that with you takes a special kind of, you got to have like some mental defects with both of you guys, to be feeding off of each other in order for this plan to maybe work. But not only that, once you get into the house, you got to have that same level of like ready to go. Like, we're ready to do this thing, but also be quiet about it, quiet as a mouse, and get in and out within a certain amount of time. I think that this personally was one person. I think that they were just slick. Like they went in and they went out. They unalived the people that they came in contact with, either because they were, targeted, or because maybe they ran into them as they were exiting. But I do think that it was one person. That's all. That's what I think anyway. And the university, actually, their student enrollment went up 40% after these crimes. So I don't think that it hurt. It was like 40% or something crazy. But I don't think it hurt the school enrollment wise. And apparently it didn't hurt the president, because he wrote a book. He was like, I'm going to write a book about it. Okay, then. Okay. I was just reading the chat. Merry Christmas, Amanda. Sure, he smoke away. Hey, Lance, welcome in, everybody. Hey, Kelly, welcome in. Welcome in, everybody. It's good to see you guys. I'm going to play this next video, which is it's a podcast. So I'm going to put up pictures for you guys, like a little overlay action. That way you have like something to look at. But it is the listeners' questions from the Idaho or the Idaho Massacre podcast. We covered that podcast season 1 and season 2. It's all of the videos are under my videos list. If you don't want to like go and look at the whole live, you can. The videos are all pre-recorded, so I pre-recorded all of those, and they're under the Idaho 4 playlist. Also, they should be under the playlist for the case against Bryan Kohberger, because I have like 2 playlists. I don't know why, but I do, and so I just keep going with it. But I listened to a couple of the listener questions, and they were actually pretty good questions. Now these ladies are just, podcast hosts. They're not like investigators, but I just thought it'd be a good little listen, for us to listen to. So, you guys can let me know by hitting the thumbs up if you like the content, or the thumbs down if you hated the content. Hopefully you'll hit the thumbs up. Also, if you guys don't mind, take a second, subscribe to the channel. We do talk true crime daily here. So different case, different day, all that stuff. So. Okay, let me see here. Let me get this playing for us, and then I will put up an overlay. That way you have something to like look at, and I'll change them out.
Every bit of evidence has been gathered. What on the off chance that it has not? And that could be the one piece that seals the fate of the case either way.
The big stunner of this case is that these weren't people that necessarily even interfaced, not even once.
This is the Idaho Massacre, a production of KT Studios and iHeartRadio. Season 2, Episode 12, Listener Questions. I'm Courtney Armstrong, a producer at KT Studios with Stephanie Leidecker and Gabe Castillo, who you'll hear reading the questions. We wanted to take this opportunity to answer some of the listener questions that have come in over the course of the season, and also to have a couple of listeners who were able to make the time on the show so we can speak with them. We're starting it off with Paige from Hoboken. First, Stephanie.
Hi, Paige.
Hi. So my question is why you think the 911 call hasn't been released yet.
There can be a multitude of things at play. For example, and Stephanie and I were talking about just this very thing recently. And in another case we covered, which is another high-profile mass murder, the Piketon Massacre, which is our other podcast, the 911 call was indeed released well before trial, well before the accused were known. So that's something that can happen. In this case, obviously, the 911 call has not been released. There have been articles, people quoting that the prosecution will release it, quote, when it's time, which means we may need to wait until the actual trial to hear the 911 call.
Which is also interesting because I think this particular call may be unlike other calls from other cases does speak a lot to the circumstances of how the bodies were found and discovered. There's been a couple of very big questions about this timeline. One, exactly who discovered the bodies? We know that the bodies were discovered hours later, and who that person was, all we know it to be is a friend of Ethan's, from my understanding. I would imagine if we hear their voice on the 911 call, that would no longer be anonymous. And they've been very tight-lipped about releasing the information of the 911 call and also the surrounding roommates, right? You could imagine that it must have been mayhem when they make this grisly discovery. We've heard 911 calls, and there's nothing more harrowing or horrifying than hearing that guttural sound, but we don't know.
Yeah, and just to add to that, within the cloud of sort of confusion that Stephanie was speaking about, should we believe, and there's no reason not to, the timeline of the murders, which places that happening between approximately 4 a.m. and 4:20 a.m., the 911 call was not placed until just a few moments before noon. So that's 8 hours later. And as Stephanie said, it's not clear precisely who necessarily made the call, but we know the call came from one of the surviving roommates' cell phones, but it was not them who was initially making connection with 911. It was initially reported as an unconscious person or persons, which seemed odd for what was ultimately found. And it turns out that that was actually the categorization that 911 call center used to let police know this is in the realm of someone unconscious versus, say, a fire or something else. So it was a 911 designation.
Which is such a really interesting point. And Paige, it's such a good question because it's such an unknowable thing, right? But that particular 911 call would answer so many questions. It would answer the who, the how, the state of affairs at that time.
Anything else you want to say, ask, or wonder about?
There was speculation that the fraternity across the street, the two roommates, went there and had some of the guys go around the house to make sure that no one was there, which I think might be another thing. Like, I think there was a lot of foot traffic in the house before they called the police.
That's really interesting.
I have seen that as well. And I think it's another thing that will come to bear. One thing that's been reported is that there were, quote, multiple voices on the 911 call. So who exactly all of those voices are, we don't yet know, but soon to find out.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Of course. Have a good night, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
In a previous episode, it was mentioned that one of the journalists had gone down to Moscow, Idaho, and noted that in and around the area, they noticed a lot of Ring cameras in the neighborhood. And from what we know, there has been footage that was released from a Ring camera. So my question is, do you think police have a lot more information than what has been released? Is this why we have yet to see the first day of trial?
Multi-layered question. Do I think there's more we haven't seen? I would bet any amount of money in the world that there is. Do I bet that investigators on every level canvassed the neighborhood and procured every piece of evidence possible at the time? Absolutely, I do. Is that part of the delay in trial? I mean, it's interesting, and I don't have this stat at the tip of my tongue, but I know we have referred to it before. The enormity of digital and other evidence that has been gathered that has to be gone through by the prosecution, by investigators, and then when handed over by the defense as well. So I think that's part of it. Also, of course, being a death penalty case that, as we've discussed, exacerbates a timeline because there's so many things that need to be done correctly. But my knee jerk to, is there more evidence from Ring cameras we don't know about? Absolutely.
I would really, really hope so, because so much of the evidence that we've been unpacking and has been set into the public or the media, really has some circumstantial sides to it. So I would have to imagine that there's a larger footprint from a technology standpoint that, frankly, we're just not aware of. It's amazing that you can get away with any crime in today's day and age with the level of ring cameras and cell phones and things that are tracking us real time. It's actually pretty astounding that there was such a blind spot, if in fact there was. So I would assume that we don't know this. But on the other side of that, we have interviewed defense attorneys that would say, look, if there was a ton of great information, they would be yelling that from the rooftops. And that would be front page news. And we would be unpacking the fact that there's a ring camera that has footage of someone else other than the accused Bryan Kohberger walking into this murder house. If that was the case, I think we would really know about it. So on the one hand, I completely agree with you, Courtney. And on the other, I don't know. Some of this feels like a little bit of a house of cards.
That's a fair point, because now that you say that, thinking about the fact that even the identification of the car took 3 times for the FBI, and this is no dig on them, but it took 3 times to publicly get it correct what the car was, assuming, of course, the accused is whose car we should be looking for.
And by the way, we don't even have an actual ID of the person driving that car. So yes, he was driving a white Elantra, and yes, it was in and around the area. And yes, that is wildly suspicious, no question. But where's the visual of him actually behind the wheel? I have to assume that that exists, or that there is some way to get around the fact that it doesn't appear that we have that.
It doesn't, I mean, it certainly hasn't been public, that or any glimpse to the public's knowledge of a license plate. So I don't know. Maybe my bet all the money in the world was a little quick on the trigger.
To that end, so let's unpack a little of that, because there do seem to be these big ticket items that gets discussed in the press. And we certainly have discussed this here as well, like these big items that make it this no question, this is the guy. There's DNA and there's this car and he was acting fishy and bushy eyebrows and by the way, it does all sort of seem like a pretty bad day and a pretty bad morning and a pretty bad stretch, frankly, of a lot of terrible things that had to happen in the worst of timing for this accused Bryan Kohberger to ultimately be accused of this crime. And then when you take a step back, there are a lot of these touch points that are like, what are the odds of that happening? Number one, having all of these images of this car in and around the area, but no actual idea of who's driving it or the license plate. I feel like if I roll through a red light, not that I ever have, I guarantee you that there's a ticket in my mailbox waiting for me somehow. So Big Brother is watching, just not that morning. And then we talk about this bushy eyebrow ID, but like, really? Is that the big thing?
So a question we did get, speaking of all the quote coincidences, had to do with a shooting that happened on the morning that Bryan Kohberger and his father departed Washington to head on their cross-country drive to Pennsylvania. And the question comes from Amy from Warwick, Rhode Island. Is there a connection between the SWAT shooting of Brent Kopacka related to the Idaho massacre?
I mean, it doesn't appear that there is. And we have gone down this rabbit hole. It is shocking to me that something that is violent, like holding somebody hostage, let alone holding your roommate hostage, happening in and around the time of these violent murders. But again, it does seem as though that may have just been a coincidence.
It does. And for listeners who aren't aware, this incident happened on December 15th, 2022. So it was about 1 month after the November 13th murders. A man named Brent Kopacka was ultimately shot by Washington State Police in Pullman, Washington, where the accused Bryan Kohberger lived. And that's where people bring up the connection. Officers were alerted that Kopacka was allegedly threatening the lives of his roommates. There was a standoff, and according to reports, there were unsuccessful negotiations. There was escalating behavior that ultimately ended in the SWAT team killing Kopacka. This happened to happen on that same morning of the drive. And in fact, when the Kohberger men were pulled over, Bryan Kohberger's father mentioned the incident. We can hear it on the audio to one of the officers.
Can you imagine? I can't. Can you imagine, like, you're this father, you're getting pulled over, and you're basically saying, wow, I feel for you, officers. A lot going on back there. You're in a white Elantra and you're allegedly driving the accused to be, but the police just happened to pull the Kohberger father-son duo in this white car driving across country. What are the odds that they get pulled over 2 different times? That's been reported about so many different ways, here included. We were under the impression, because that's what we were told, we had early reported that that was a very choreographed event, that Bryan Kohberger was being pulled over because the police were looking to see if he had slashes on his hand. And now we're hearing that that might not have been the case, that it was just a really bad day behind the wheel.
It seems like it really was, hard as this is to swallow, coincidence. It has since come to bear, and hold on, I have actually from the report here, the FBI has maintained its agents were not involved in the stops. And also the sheriff's office in Indiana, who actually did the stops, also have said publicly that this had nothing to do with the murders whatsoever. It was a separate drug interdiction check. Yes, it's been confirmed by both the agencies that the FBI did not call for those stops. They did not know it was going to happen. It was literally coincidence.
And it was coincidence that on the same day that dad and son depart on their cross-country escapade of a trip, that there's also a hostage situation, that a nearby neighbor is shot down by authorities because he's holding his roommate hostage, was suffering from mental illness, and has many, many layers to this story.
All officials have said there is no connection. And in fact, this is it's a good example of a horrible thing, which is when people do make connections because of circumstance or because of coincidence, when indeed there isn't. And actually, Kopaka's family has spoken out, as have his good friends, saying that the speculation of his involvement with the murders has marred his name. And he was a vet. He earned a Purple Heart. And it's just a tragedy in and of itself. And it's a further tragedy of what can happen when people are linked, whether in the news or via social media, without factual merit. Let's stop here for a break. We'll be back in a moment.
Dang it, Rapper. I'm glad you're back, because I know that you weren't. Yeah, I was like, we know that he wasn't the one, though, that was saying the mean stuff about you. I don't think that was him, because Rapper just does not like letters. But welcome back, Rapper. Go back over to Allegedly's. She loves being trolled. She loves it. She loves it so much, Rapper. She loves it. You should spell her name out. She's gonna beat me up. That makes me laugh even harder.
This is from Marcella via Instagram. Do you think if Bryan had left his phone at home, he would have been arrested? Could the DNA and surveillance of his vehicle have been enough?
Court, you got to take this one. This is a rabbit hole that I may never get out of.
It's an excellent question, and it's a much debated question, and it's ultimately an opinion, right? So the DNA, and this is just my opinion, the DNA is what tied Kohberger to this investigation by his name through his father once the DNA on the knife sheath was found. And according to court documents, Kohberger's DNA is at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to match DNA found at the scene than a person unrelated to Kohberger's father. So those are pretty strong odds to overcome.
Those numbers are shocking. Of course, when we read that for the first time, it was like, whoa, I guess this guy did it.
I think it was like 28 zeros behind that.
However, listen, some of this stuff can be explained away. I know we covered this at some point this season, but imagine that you're a knife enthusiast when you go to these, like a convention for people who are fishermen and hunters, and there's a lot of knives for sale there and they're on display, and you might be looking at the various knives for purchase, and yeah, you want to pick it up, maybe handle it a little bit, and in doing so, hey, guess what? It's possible that a droplet of your DNA is now under the sheath of that knife. And now you put it back down and this person goes about their merry way, and that knife eventually gets sold to someone and it winds up at a murder scene. That could be the connection. It's such a small amount. On the other side of it, that is no question that
But
the DNA that is found.
let's just think about this. If that happened, the new person, whoever had the knife next, they would be messing with that same buckle, and I believe their skin would be in there. I think it would be contaminated. It wouldn't be such a simple thing like, nope, whoop, there's his DNA right there. It wouldn't be that simple if that were the case. If it were between, if this knife was held between, more than one person, I think there would be multiple contributors on that sheath, and there's not. There's Bryan Kohberger, and I'm assuming there may be Kaylee or Maddie on there, and maybe Zan and Ethan. We don't know exactly for sure, but I would say just Kaylee and Maddie, because that's where I believe he left it I believe in the beginning.
On the sheath is connected to the accused Bryan Kohberger. That's pretty damning.
I mean, listen, I think these are all points that will be brought up by the defense, if I had to guess, because, they are valid. But yeah, just to simply answer your question, Marcella, yeah, I do think that DNA in the surveillance of his vehicle would have been enough, because the last thing I will say on this, because you said, what if we took the cell phone pings out of it? Keep in mind that during the time of the murders, as we understand it, there was no reporting to the network from Kohberger's phone. His phone was turned off or was somehow unavailable, whether it was under a rock or somehow it stopped pinging off of any cell phone towers at 2:47 a.m. And then it did not go back to being received by cell phone towers until 4:48. So in a way, there are no pings at that time.
What a coincidence, right? That would be hard to throw under the coincidence box. I mean, I guess that's what is so interesting about this case. Yes, while some of these pieces of the puzzle do in fact seem circumstantial when looked at individually, I guess that's the whole point, right? You dump them all in a bag and you're like, that's a lot of circumstantial evidence in one bag.
We do have a follow-up question from Marcella. She unfortunately couldn't join us today, but her follow-up question is, I believe the killer was watching the house before he entered. Do you think he entered the house after the food was delivered in hopes that they would pin it on the food delivery driver?
Yeah.
Great question, by the way. I mean, we have discussed this. We really have. The difference is, though, here, you would have to be predicting that food would be ordered and therefore delivered at a certain time to ping it on the guy, unless they always received food at the same time, which is not totally unheard of, I would imagine, in a college party house when you're out kind of late. But it's sort of a leap. That would be a lot of premeditation. Or maybe the person who committed this crime just went for it after they saw there was somebody exiting and entering the house.
And next up is another listener question. Here's Maya from Colorado.
So my question is, like, let's say they ordered it from Uber Eats. If he is an Uber Eats driver, which I don't know if he is, he would get a notification that at that address they ordered food. So he could be aware that they ordered food and that it was going to be arriving at so-and-so time.
It seems like for that to be the case, then whoever the murderer would then have to themselves be a driver, correct? I love that question, but I think that actually goes back to the fact that there was, in Kohberger's case, his phone was unresponsive to any cell phone towers. So actually, I think that because of that reason, that couldn't be the case.
David from Massachusetts asks via email, do you think the accused committed the murders that night knowing that he was going home for Thanksgiving and had a reason to make a cross-country road trip, thinking that might be enough to make the police look a different direction?
This goes to knowing what's in someone's mind, which I do not. But the thought of knowing that fairly soon after a crime is committed, you will have 3,000 miles worth of distance between yourself and the crime scene, that certainly could be something that comes into play, especially the alleged is a criminology student.
Yeah, I'm going out on a limb here. So just take this with a grain of nothingness. But yes, of course, he knew he was going home for the holidays and that there would be a break and that that was a kind of a nice way to exit the worst situation ever. I always thought it was slightly interesting that his birthday is a week later than the murders. So he would be turning 29 in 1 week. So you commit a murder of 4, hop in a car with your dad, drive across country, get pulled over twice, and then go home to your mom who's cooking for you and maybe preparing for your birthday celebration as you're oddly unpacking any evidence from your car, allegedly, and putting things into baggies because you're wearing plastic gloves. I don't know. It's just so wild. It seems impossible, but or does it?
It's a follow-up question. Why did he, Kohberger, let one roommate live after she had seen him? And the murders were so violent and seemed so personal that the accused doesn't really have any connection to the victims. Why do you think that he made them look so violent?
Well, I think I'm going to jump in real quickly here because I think this is the cross section of this entire case. And what is so compelling and maddening about it is, yes, it feels so intimate, but yes, there's no connection. And I guess that's the real look at where we live today with social media is making us feel so connected. Not just social media, that's not an attack on all things media, obviously, but just we're all really connected to people that we actually don't really have access to. And, we can look at that till we're blue in the face, but I think that's probably what's the big stunner of this case is that, yeah, these weren't people that necessarily even interfaced, not even once necessarily, but probably had some cross section on their phones.
It's staggering. And I think you're right, Stephanie. So David from Situate, you have your finger on the pulse of what is so compelling at the center of this case. And it's so hard to imagine why whomever committed these murders allowed an eyewitness and an ear witness to remain. I don't know.
Thank God they did, right? Thank God they did. Underscore, exclamation point, in bold letters, shout it from the rooftop. Thank goodness the remaining roommates were spared. It's a stunner, right?
To your point, David, that the lack of connection that both the prosecution and the defense have stipulated for the court record that previously it had been thought that there was some stalking personally of the victims, and they have both agreed that that was not the case. So, yeah, we will see this all come to bear. Let's stop here for another break. We'll be back in a moment. We have Wade from Baltimore calling in. Hello, Wade.
I was wondering if you all feel that the house demolition may alter the verdict.
Yeah, if I'm guilty, I want that house demolished.
But if you're not guilty, wouldn't you also potentially want it there for any shred of evidence that could be found to exonerate you and to then implicate the person who actually did it?
Yes, if I'm guilty, I want it gone because there's no evidence to be had. But if I'm not guilty, of course, yes, you're absolutely right. You want to be able to make sure that there could be some proof and some new evidence discovered.
To specifically answer this, Wade, I felt different after speaking with a bunch of our different experts and hearing their points of view, because my knee jerk was that, okay, this house has been gone over. It has been gone over thoroughly. And there are 3D pictures and every bit of evidence has been gathered. what on the off chance that it has not? And that could be the one piece that seals the fate of the case either way. So yeah, I think it could be affected by the demolition. Over the course of the season, we've gotten a lot of listener questions, and we appreciate all of them. And I will say one of the most commented on episodes was about Howard Bloom's book, When the Night Comes Falling. And the questions are all valid, all of them are. And it was a little bit controversial. People had different perspectives they walked away from the episode with. And I think our answer is, of course, we're going to interview the person who comes out with the book that's on the topic of what we're discussing. It would have been odd for us, honestly, not to. It's a big moment in time for the case, and we want to glean from all perspectives and let all different avenues of information flow into us and out to you. So that's the main thing I would say about it. Is it was a touch point in this timeline, and we thought it was important to note it.
Sheila, via email, has asked, I wonder if Bryan Kohberger is listening to you. It unnerves me a bit. Have you ever thought about that?
Well, now that unnerves me a bit too, because until this moment, I have not. What a question.
I mean, think about it though. This guy is by himself in a cell in the basement of the courthouse with probably not too much going on. It's been reported that he watches the news through the bars of his cell and that he is interested in the coverage. No, I don't like it. But I will say this. If the accused Bryan Kohberger, if he has a burning listener question, we would like to hear it.
Last question. Since it's the end of the season, is there anything else you guys want to say? Any last thoughts for the listeners?
I would say sometimes our contributors become a part of the headlines themselves because what they're reporting on catches wind in the media. And it's worth noting that we get every single thing legally vetted by First Amendment right lawyers. So we have to take a lot of stuff out. You'd be shocked about all the things that we can't air because, look, we don't want to accuse anybody of murder. We don't want to interrupt a police investigation. And we don't want to get it wrong. So the spirit of this has been to curate information because there's been so much misinformation. The big ticket items, not only this season, but just seemingly in the case in general, is the vehicle. And then the fact that he's not ID'd in the vehicle. DNA evidence. Hard to explain that away, except it's so little DNA evidence. Does that make that hard to stick? And then there's odd, creepy, weird behavior. We've heard all of those words. Those are not our words. That's what we've been told. Does having an odd personality make you a killer? Of course not. We really just do not know. And I think the roommates, the first responders, the friends that had to call 911, those are big pieces of the puzzle. And we just don't have the answers. And we respect their privacy. And we know quite obviously why authorities are keeping that information very close to the vest. They have to. There's been so much back and forth about sharing of evidence and the defense saying that the prosecution is holding back evidence. And, look, we just saw that not too long ago with the Alec Baldwin trial. Suddenly it appeared the prosecution was holding on to something that was really relevant. Again, different cases. I'm not making any comparisons, just simply this evidence piece of it, right, is kind of an interesting nuance to this whole thing. And I think that's what's also really both scary and really interesting about this case. We've talked to so many people. When you're in front of one person, you're like, that totally makes sense. And then the next person's like, well, devil's advocate. And I'm like, good point. That makes sense. Like there's a 360 about good points. So I guess it depends where you really want to throw your heart into it. But our hearts are not the thing that are supposed to keep the justice wheel moving. It's supposed to be facts. And in this case, it's pretty plentiful on both sides. I'm more confused than ever.
I think part of our collective goal in this season of the podcast was it's a very specific moment in time. The arrest has been made of the one suspect in the case that happened a while ago. The trial has not yet begun. However, there has been so many facts, so many feelings, and we wanted to kind of give that 360 view of what are the touchstones of what's going on now. What is the importance of these pretrial motions? And so it was really, I think for us, a really specific look at a specific moment in time, and to try and responsibly gather and present to you the information that exists to the best of our ability. The trial is slated to happen next summer, that's summer 2025, and we will be keeping very close tabs on everything going on in the meantime. As new information arises, we will be back with new episodes and greatly look forward to that time.
And also to listeners who have reached out with information and tips, so interesting and helpful. And we really do try to address all of them. So please keep it coming. I want to make sure that we touch on the point that, because oftentimes we're always talking about the case and the forensics and unpacking the legal process and looking at jurisdictions. And our goal is to unpack and offer all sides. And sometimes we could lose the reality of the 4 victims that we're talking about. And Xana, Madison, Ethan, and Kaylee, we just really want to make sure that anybody listening, ourselves included, that we're all taking a moment to send healing thoughts to their families and to know that we are fighting with them alongside in our hearts, and that the goal to find justice is one that we all share. We want to make sure that everyone knows that collectively we're all interested in them and want them to feel supported.
Okay, let me get the banner down. There we go. Here I am. So I wanted to listen to that with you guys because I thought that would be the questions were pretty good. I think they're questions that we all have as listeners or as, people that have just been involved in this case, whether that was from the beginning or you guys may have come through, months later and discovered, the Idaho 4 case. But either way, I thought the listener questions were pretty good. If you don't know about the Idaho 4 case, I think we'll do like a redo kind of. We were starting. So okay, if you want to join on the iPhone, you have to go through Safari instead of like the YouTube app. That's the only thing. I think that's the trick to it. And like go through the actual internet browser. It's really weird. But I thought we could go back to the beginning of the case and go through the affidavit. Just like we don't have to go through all of those documents again. We'll be here. Actually, if we did that, we'd probably be making it right to trial. Because we've got another, I think it's next August is trial. They said, I think July, like the end of July is for jury selection. And then sometime in the beginning of August, 2025, of course, it'll be the trial. I am excited for this trial to come. It's been way long overdue. I'm sure his family want to know what's going on. I know that the victims' families, they want to know what's going on. Madison or Maddie Mogan's mom did an interview. I was going to drop the link for that because I put it on my page. That way, if you guys want to watch it. This is the first time her mom has spoke out. And so thank you for becoming a new member. You're quick. I'll put the link for that in the chat. But thank you so much for becoming a member. That means a lot. Thank you. So the link that I just put in there, that is for Maddie Mogan's mom's interview that she did. I did a video on it like last week. And I was surprised it didn't get that many views. And I'm like, did I just not hit the algorithm right? But I think it's because I haven't done very many pre-recordeds lately. You guys probably didn't even see it. Or if you did, you were probably like, what's she doing? what's she doing over there? Because I used to do at least pre-recorded at least a couple times a week, and I'm going to try to get back into doing those. So the beginning of the year, I'll have a couple channel changes where we're going to like do more pre-recordeds. We'll do more members only like things. I want to do like some trivia nights with you, do like some all together. We can do trivia nights too. But I thought it'd be better under like a members only, so it's not in with the true crime as much. But yeah, I think it'll be it'll be a good year. I'm looking forward to 2025 and spending it with y'all. So don't go anywhere, homie. Everybody stay all healthy and lock your doors. Lock your doors. Because, there's bad people out there. Yeah, images don't go away. Yeah. I think that them tearing down the house, well, they couldn't go back into it anyway. They couldn't take a jury in there. The contamination alone would be it would be bad. You'd have to take in 12 to 16 jurors, the judge, the prosecution team, the defense team, Bryan Kohberger. They're not all going to fit. I also think they wouldn't have taken them to the house because they took out the walls and the floorboards and a lot of that stuff for testing. So there was nothing in there to walk on, like really. The house wasn't like it was when the crime happened. Another thing is, if they want to know about the acoustics of that house, they're going to have to be there at 4 a.m. on the same day, to like even try to attempt to do that kind of experiment. You can't do that in the middle of the day with a jury. They're going to absorb the sound and things like that. So I think that, and I also think that it was just, I didn't want Ethan's brother to look at that house. I didn't want him to have to look over there and see that house there. So I don't know. I'm glad that for the kids, for, Ethan's brother and sister, they were still there on, the campus. For them, I'm glad that they tore it down for them. So if it gives them any peace, then that, gives me peace. But I do remember the day that they tore it down. And that was, remember, we were up so early. What was it, like 6 o'clock in the morning? So it was 6 there. So it'd have been like 8 here or 9. It was early. I remember that. I don't know. It's just, man. Really? I'm so sorry about that, Denise. The the Henrietta home, it burned down like not too long ago. So, and we'll let you know all about the case, Tennessee gal. You'll be like, what? What? And like I have the whole we can go through the house, like, I forget what it's called, like what app it is. Kula app. Kula, I think it's called. But they did a bunch where they put in like the pictures, they put in the timeline, they put in all kinds of stuff. So we can walk through the home and we can, walk through like each part of the house and get like tidbits of information. Because after a while, it like your memory will fade. It does, it fades. So I'm sure if we go back to the beginning, I'll think of something, because we were going to do this before. I think it was before Sebastian went missing. We started it. That's how long ago it's been. That's how long. I think it was last like December, January. And we were going to watch all the Nancy Grace episodes because she did a bunch of them. So maybe we'll even go back to that. Maybe we'll do a combination. So that way, Yeah, BHB and Olivia are just something else, aren't they? Yeah, right, Ashley. Yeah, they did. They started before. Yeah, because I remember Christy Gonzalez saying she woke up, like she went to use the bathroom or something, and she went to get her coffee so she could sit down and watch it, and she didn't even make her coffee, and it was on. So, man. But yeah, that whole house had nothing but blood in it in those rooms. And they would have to, you know? But yeah. Olivia was so excited. I bet she was. She got a lot of subscribers off of that case. She definitely did. I guess, I mean, I gained a lot too, though, so I can't say much, but not like her. But I'm gonna jump off of here for the night. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. I hope you had a good Christmas. I really, truly, I hope you guys all had a good Christmas. I hope you got to spend it with family, and if you didn't, I hope you got to just relax and just hang out. And if this was the highlight of your night, I hope that it was worth it. I hope that we were good. We were good for you. So I'll be back on tomorrow. I will be doing a day live, I think, over on the other channel. I heard Bullhorn Betty's doing all the things. I heard she's acting up, and we're going to review it. But it'll be on the Unfiltered with Tanya channel. So if you guys want to, you can subscribe over there. Also, let me go ahead and put this back in. This link right here, if you want to, you could watch the interview that Maddie Mogan's mom did. It was the first time she spoke out about anything regarding this case, and she had a lot to say. And take your tissues because you're going to need them. You'll need them. It's a beautiful interview. It was a beautiful interview. So make sure you go over, you watch that, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Bye, guys.